The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Katherine Zimmer collapsed onto the dusty road, her body finally giving out after days of walking through the unforgiving terrain of 1875 frontier country, the death of her husband still a raw wound in her heart. The dust swirled around her prone form as she lay there, her once beautiful blue dress now tattered and dirty, her lips cracked from dehydration, and her hope as barren as the landscape surrounding her. The stage that had carried her had been attacked 3 days prior, the driver killed, the other passengers scattered to the winds. She had walked, following what she believed to be the route to Copper Springs, but her strength had finally abandoned her. As consciousness began to fade, Katherine heard the steady rhythm of hoofbeats approaching. She tried to call out, but her parched throat produced only a raspy whisper. The sound grew louder until it stopped altogether, replaced by the crunch of boots on gravel. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, concerned, tinged with a slight drawl that marked him as a local. Katherine managed to open her eyes, squinting against the harsh sunlight. A tall figure stood over her, silhouetted against the bright sky. As he knelt beside her, his features came into focus. Weathered skin tanned by the sun, kind gray eyes, and a strong jawline partially obscured by several days' worth of stubble. "Water," she managed to croak. The man quickly produced a canteen, gently lifting her head to help her drink. The cool liquid was the sweetest thing Katherine had ever tasted. "Easy now," he cautioned as she gulped desperately. "Too much at once will make you sick." After she had drunk enough to revive her slightly, the man studied her face with concern. "Name's Xavier Bowman, madam. What happened to you?" "Katherine Zimmer," she whispered. "Stage, attacked, been walking, 3 days." Xavier's expression darkened. "Damn road agents, they're getting bolder." He glanced down the empty road, then back at her. "You're in no condition to travel any further on foot. My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. I can take you there, get you fed and rested." Katherine tried to sit up but found she lacked the strength. "I couldn't impose, it's no imposition," Xavier cut in firmly. "I promise you rest and safety, Mrs. Zimmer. My foreman's wife can tend to you until you're well enough to continue your journey." Before she could protest further, Xavier slid his strong arms beneath her and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Katherine found herself cradled against his chest, the scent of leather, horse, and clean sweat enveloping her. Under different circumstances, she might have been mortified at such intimate contact with a stranger, but she was too exhausted to care. "My things," she murmured, weakly gesturing toward a small carpet bag lying in the dust nearby. Xavier nodded. "I'll get it." He carried her to his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding with intelligent eyes, and carefully settled her in the saddle before retrieving her bag. Then he mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist to keep her from falling. "Rest if you can, Mrs. Zimmer," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "I've got you." As they rode, Katherine drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady movement of the horse beneath them and the solid presence of the man behind her. Despite her grief and exhaustion, she felt safe for the first time since the stagecoach attack. The journey passed in a blur. When Katherine next became fully aware of her surroundings, they were approaching a modest but well-maintained ranch house nestled against a backdrop of distant mountains. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and a corral held half a dozen horses. "Welcome to Crescent B Ranch," Xavier said as they rode into the yard. "Not much to look at compared to some spreads, but it's home." A middle-aged woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Katherine. "Martha," Xavier called, "this lady needs help. She was left stranded when her stage was attacked." Martha hurried forward as Xavier dismounted and gently lifted Katherine down. "Lord have mercy, bring her inside, Xavier. I'll heat some water and fix something for her to eat." The next few hours passed in a haze of kind hands, warm water, and soft voices. Martha Finley, the foreman's wife, helped Katherine bathe and change into a borrowed nightgown. She applied salve to Catherine's sunburned skin and blistered feet, then settled her into a clean, comfortable bed with a bowl of hearty stew and fresh bread. "You're safe now, Mrs. Zimmer," Martha assured her. "Rest as long as you need." Mr. Bowman isn't the type to hurry a person who's been through an ordeal. "Please call me Katherine," she replied weakly. "And thank you. I don't know what would have happened if Mr. Bowman hadn't found me." Martha patted her hand. "Xavier's a good man. Lost his wife to fever 5 years back, but he never let it harden his heart." The information sent a small jolt through Katherine, a widower, like her. She pushed the thought away, too tired to examine it. "My husband died 6 months ago," she found herself saying. "I was on my way to Copper Springs to live with my sister." "I'm sorry for your loss," Martha said softly, "but you rest now. We can talk more when you're stronger." Katherine nodded, her eyelids already heavy. Within moments of Martha leaving the room, she was asleep. She woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented, but then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up cautiously, pleasantly surprised to find that, while she was still sore and weak, she felt markedly better than she had in days. A soft knock sounded at the door and Martha entered with a tray. "Good morning. I hoped you might be awake. How are you feeling?" "Much improved, thank you," Katherine replied, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. "Xavier rode into town at first light," Martha informed her. "He's checking with the sheriff about the stage attack and sending a telegram to your sister in Copper Springs to let her know you're safe." Katherine's eyes widened. "That's incredibly thoughtful of him." Martha smiled knowingly. "Like I said, he's a good man." She busied herself opening the curtains wider. "When you feel up to it, you're welcome to come downstairs. Don't rush, though. Xavier was very clear that you're to recover at your own pace." After Martha left, Katherine ate the breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, then carefully got out of bed. Her body protested, but she was determined to regain her strength. She found a simple calico dress laid out for her, one of Martha's, no doubt, and slowly dressed herself. The house was quiet as she made her way downstairs. She found Martha in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. "There you are," Martha smiled. "Feel like sitting outside for a bit?" "Fresh air does wonders." Katherine nodded, and Martha led her to a shaded porch that offered a view of the ranch yard and the mountains beyond. The landscape that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving yesterday now revealed unexpected beauty. The way the sunlight caught the distant peaks, the vibrant green of a stand of cottonwoods along what must be a creek, the colorful wildflowers dotting the grassland. "It's beautiful," Katherine murmured. "Xavier picked this spot special," Martha said. "Most ranchers build where it's practical, but he wanted a view that would lift the spirit on hard days." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Xavier rode into the yard accompanied by another man older, with a silver-streaked beard whom Katherine guessed was Martha's husband. Xavier dismounted with fluid grace and handed the reins to a young ranch hand before striding toward the house. When he spotted Katherine on the porch, his face broke into a warm smile that transformed his features from merely handsome to breathtaking. "Mrs. Zimmer," he called, removing his hat as he approached. "It's good to see you up and about." "Thanks to your kindness, Mr. Bowman," she replied. "I don't know how to repay you." He waved away her thanks as he climbed the porch steps. "No repayment necessary. I sent a telegram to your sister. She'll be mighty relieved to hear you're safe." "Did you learn anything about the stage attack?" Katherine asked. Xavier's expression darkened. "Sheriff thinks it was the Reeves gang. They've been hitting stages along the Copper Springs route for months." He hesitated, then added, "I'm afraid the driver didn't make it. 2 other passengers were found alive, though barely. They're at the doctor's in town." Katherine closed her eyes briefly, remembering the kind old driver who had told her stories to pass the time. Those poor people. Xavier sat in the chair beside her. "Sheriff's forming a posse to go after the gang. I've offered to join them." Martha made a disapproving noise. "Is that wise, Xavier? You've got the ranch to think about." Jim can handle things for a few days, Xavier replied, referring to Martha's husband. Someone needs to make those roads safe again. Katherine studied his face, noting the determination in his gray eyes. This was a man who lived by a code, who couldn't stand by when there was injustice to be righted. It reminded her of her late husband, who had been a lawyer always fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "When will you go?" she asked softly. "Day after tomorrow," he answered. "Which gives me time to make sure you're properly settled and recovering." "I couldn't possibly stay here while you're gone," Katherine protested. "I should continue to Copper Springs as soon as possible." Xavier's gaze was steady. "Mrs. Zimmer, you're welcome here as long as you need. Your sister knows you're safe. There's no rush to travel again so soon, especially with the Reeves gang still at large." Martha nodded in agreement. "It would be a comfort to have another woman around while the men are gone, Katherine. Please stay, at least until they return." Faced with their combined concern, Katherine relented. "Very well, but only until you return, Mr. Bowman, and I insist on making myself useful while I'm here." Xavier's smile returned, warming her more than the Arizona sun. "I reckon we can agree to those terms, Mrs. Zimmer." The next day passed quickly as Katherine regained more of her strength. True to her word, she insisted on helping Martha with household tasks, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of domestic work. She learned that the ranch, while not the largest in the territory, was prosperous enough to employ 6 full-time hands in addition to Jim Finley, the foreman. Xavier spent most of the day preparing for the posse, but he joined Katherine and the Finleys for meals, during which she learned more about him. He had come to Arizona Territory in 1866 after serving in the Union Army during the Civil War. He had built the ranch from nothing, working alongside his young wife, Emma, until her untimely death from fever in 1870. Despite that loss, he had persevered, gradually expanding the ranch into a respectable operation. In turn, Katherine shared her own story. She had been married to Daniel Zimmer, a Boston lawyer who had died of pneumonia the previous winter. With no children and few prospects in the East, she had decided to join her sister Margaret, who had moved to Copper Springs with her husband years earlier. "It was time for a fresh start," she explained as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "Everything in Boston reminded me of what I had lost." Xavier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I considered selling up and moving on after Emma died. Everywhere I looked, I saw her ghost." "What made you stay?" Katherine asked. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant horizon. "This land," he finally said. "We chose it together, Emma and I worked it together. She's part of it now. Leaving felt like abandoning her all over again." He glanced at Katherine. "Does that sound foolish?" "Not at all," she assured him. "We all honor our dead in different ways." They lapsed into comfortable silence as darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the velvet sky. Katherine was struck by how at ease she felt with this man she had known for only 2 days. There was something solid and dependable about Xavier Bowman, a quiet strength that she found immensely appealing. The thought startled her. Was she developing feelings for him? No, surely it was just gratitude for his kindness, combined with the natural intimacy that came from sharing stories of loss. She had no business thinking of any man that way, not when Daniel had been gone only 6 months. Yet as they said goodnight and Xavier's hand briefly touched hers, Katherine couldn't deny the small thrill that ran through her at the contact. The next morning dawned with a sense of tension. Xavier would be leaving with the posse at noon. Katherine found him in the barn, checking his saddle and gear one last time. "You're determined to go then," she said, watching him from the barn door. He looked up, a half-smile on his face. "It's the right thing to do, I know." Katherine stepped further into the barn, breathing in the comforting smells of hay and horses. "But it doesn't make it any easier to see you ride into danger." Xavier set down the rifle he had been checking and moved toward her. "I'm touched by your concern, Mrs. Zimmer." "Katherine," she corrected him softly, After all we've shared, I think we can dispense with formalities. Katherine, he repeated, and the way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. I promise I'll be careful, she nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to meet his eyes. I'll hold you to that promise, Xavier. He reached out, his fingers gently lifting her chin until she was looking at him. I'm coming back, he said, his voice low and intense. You can count on that. For a moment they stood there, connected by his touch and the current of something unspoken passing between them. Then the moment was broken by Jim Finley's voice calling from outside. Xavier, sheriff's messenger, just rode in. They're gathering in town in an hour. Xavier stepped back, his hand dropping to his side. I'd better finish up here, Katherine nodded, feeling strangely bereft without his touch. Of course, I'll go help Martha prepare some food for your journey. An hour later, Xavier rode out, turning once to tip his hat to Katherine, who stood on the porch watching him go. She lifted her hand in farewell, fighting the irrational fear that she would never see him again. He'll be back, Martha said, coming to stand beside her. That man's too stubborn to let a gang of outlaws get the better of him, Katherine smiled weakly. I hope you're right. The days that followed were filled with work as Katherine threw herself into helping around the ranch. She assisted Martha with cooking and cleaning, mended torn shirts and trousers for the ranch hands, and even learned to gather eggs from the ornery hens that pecked at her fingers. At night, she lay awake, wondering where Xavier was, if he was safe, if he was thinking of her as she was thinking of him. It was ridiculous, this growing attachment to a man she barely knew. Yet there it was, blooming like a desert flower after rain. On the fourth day after Xavier's departure, Katherine was hanging laundry on the line when she heard Martha call her name with urgency. She turned to see the older woman hurrying across the yard, her face pale. What is it? Katherine asked, her heart suddenly racing. Riders coming, Martha said, pointing to a dust cloud in the distance. Too many to be just our men returning. They waited anxiously as the riders approached. As they drew closer, Katherine could make out Jim Finley at the front, followed by Xavier and several other men. Relief flooded her, quickly followed by concern when she realized they were moving slowly, carefully. Something's wrong, Martha murmured. The riders entered the yard and Katherine gasped when she saw Xavier. He was slumped forward in his saddle, his shirt stained with blood. Jim and another man helped him dismount, supporting him between them. Katherine rushed forward. What happened? Ambush, Jim grunted. Xavier took a bullet in the shoulder. We patched him up best we could, but he needs proper tending. They helped Xavier into the house and upstairs to his bedroom. Katherine followed, her heart in her throat as they laid him on the bed. He was conscious but pale, his jaw clenched against the pain. The doctor's been sent for, Jim told her, but it'll be a few hours before he gets here. Katherine nodded. I'll stay with him. Martha can show me what supplies you have. Once the men had left, Katherine carefully cut away Xavier's bloodied shirt to reveal the bandaged wound. The makeshift dressing was soaked through with blood. This needs to be cleaned and properly bandaged, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Xavier managed a weak smile. Are you saying the boys didn't do a good job? They did their best, Katherine replied, returning his smile despite her worry. But I think I can improve upon it. With Martha's help, she gathered clean bandages, boiled water, and what few medical supplies the ranch had on hand. Then she set to work, cleaning the wound as gently as she could. The bullet went clean through, she observed with relief. That's fortunate. Xavier winced as she applied pressure to stop the bleeding. Doesn't feel fortunate. Katherine worked in silence for a while, focusing on her task. When she had finished bandaging the wound, she helped Xavier drink some water and take a dose of laudanum for the pain. You should rest now, she told him, brushing a lock of dark hair from his forehead. He caught her hand before she could withdraw it. Stay, he asked, his voice rough with pain and something else she couldn't quite identify. Katherine nodded, settling into a chair beside the bed. I'll be right here. As the laudanum took effect, Xavier's grip on her hand relaxed, but she didn't pull away. She sat there, watching his chest rise and fall, thinking about how easily she could have lost him before whatever was growing between them had a chance to bloom. The doctor arrived late that evening, examined the wound, and pronounced that Katherine had done an excellent job of cleaning and bandaging it. "Keep it clean, make sure he rests, and he should heal just fine," the doctor instructed. "He's a lucky man." An inch to the left, and that bullet would have found his heart. Over the next several days, Katherine rarely left Xavier's side. She changed his bandages, helped him eat, read to him from one of the few books in the house, and talked with him for hours as his strength slowly returned. They spoke of everything and nothing: childhood memories, hopes, fears, favorite foods, the best horses they had ever ridden. With each conversation, Katherine felt herself falling deeper under his spell. It wasn't just his handsome face or the warmth of his smile. It was his integrity, his kindness, his quiet strength in the face of adversity. One afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the bedroom window, Xavier asked the question Katherine had been dreading. "When will you continue on to Copper Springs?" She busied herself adjusting his pillows to avoid his gaze. "When you're well enough not to need nursing." "Katherine," he said softly, "look at me." She reluctantly met his eyes. "I'm healing well," he said. "Another week and I won't need much help. Will you leave then?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Katherine took a deep breath. "I don't know," she admitted. "I should go to my sister. That was my plan. But, Xavier prompted when she trailed off. "But I've found something unexpected here," she finished, her heart pounding. "Something I wasn't looking for." Xavier reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth through her veins. "I've found something too," he said. "Something I thought I'd never find again after Emma died." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. "Xavier, I know it's soon," he interrupted. "For both of us, you're still grieving Daniel. I understand if you need more time, if you still want to go to Copper Springs. But I want you to know that I've come to care for you, Katherine, deeply." Tears welled in her eyes. "I care for you too," she whispered. "More than I thought possible after such a short time. It frightens me how much." Xavier squeezed her hand. "What are you afraid of?" "Losing again," she admitted. "Loving and losing, I'm not sure my heart could bear it." "Life offers no guarantees," Xavier said gently. "We both know that better than most. But is the fear of loss worth denying yourself the chance at happiness?" Katherine considered his words. She thought of Daniel, of how he had always encouraged her to embrace life fully, to take risks for the things that mattered. Would he want her to turn away from a second chance at love out of loyalty to his memory? "No," she finally said. "It isn't worth it." Xavier's face broke into a smile that made her heart skip. "So you'll stay, at least a while longer?" Katherine nodded. "I'll stay." As Xavier recovered, their bond deepened. Katherine sent a letter to her sister explaining her delayed arrival and hinting at the reason why. Margaret's reply was supportive, expressing delight at her sister's unexpected happiness, and assuring her that there would always be a place for her in Copper Springs should she need it. By the time Xavier was well enough to resume light duties around the ranch, Katherine had become an integral part of daily life at Crescent B. The hands tipped their hats to her with newfound respect, having seen her competence during their boss's convalescence. Martha beamed approvingly whenever she saw Xavier and Katherine together, which was often. One evening, about a month after the shooting, Xavier suggested a ride to show Katherine one of his favorite spots on the ranch. They set out just before sunset, Xavier leading the way to a small promontory overlooking a winding creek bordered by cottonwoods. "It's beautiful," Katherine breathed as they dismounted. Xavier spread a blanket on the ground, and they sat side by side, watching as the setting sun painted the landscape in vivid hues of orange, pink, and purple. "I used to come here to think after Emma died," Xavier said quietly. "It helped somehow, seeing the beauty that remained in the world despite my loss." Katherine nodded, understanding perfectly. "After Daniel died, I would walk in the public garden in Boston. Even in winter, there was something peaceful about it." Xavier took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Katherine, I've been thinking a lot about us, about what I want for the future." She turned to look at him, her heart suddenly racing. "Oh. I know we've only known each other a short time," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "And I know we both carry the past with us, but I've come to love you, Katherine Zimmer. I love your strength, your kindness, your laugh. I love the way you face challenges head on. I love the future I can imagine with you by my side." Tears blurred Katherine's vision. "Xavier," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. In the fading light, she could see it was a simple gold ring set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment, the right person." He took a deep breath. "Katherine, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here at Crescent B?" For a moment, Katherine couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Then, as a tear slipped down her cheek, she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you." His answering smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Katherine wrapped her arms around him, marveling at the journey that had brought her here from despair on a dusty road to hope and love on this beautiful ranch. They were married 2 months later in a simple ceremony attended by the ranch hands, neighboring ranchers, and Katherine's sister Margaret, who traveled from Copper Springs for the occasion. The bride wore a new blue dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, and carried a bouquet of desert blooms. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch of twisted juniper branches, Katherine thought of how close she had come to never knowing this happiness. If Xavier hadn't found her that day on the road, if he hadn't lifted her up and promised her rest, their paths never would have crossed. Life was strange that way, she reflected as Xavier slipped a wedding band onto her finger. Sometimes the darkest moments, like collapsing from exhaustion on a lonely road, led to the brightest beginnings. "I love you, Mrs. Bowman," Xavier whispered as he sealed their vows with a kiss. "And I love you, Mr. Bowman," Katherine replied, her heart full to bursting. As cheers erupted around them, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home not in the sister's house she had been traveling to, but here, with this man who had lifted her both literally and figuratively from the depths of despair. 2 years later, Xavier held their newborn daughter, Emma Katherine Bowman, while Katherine watched from their bed, tired but radiant with happiness. "She's perfect," Xavier murmured, awe evident in his voice as he gazed at the tiny bundle in his arms. "She is," Katherine agreed, reaching out to touch the baby's velvet soft cheek. Xavier settled carefully beside her on the bed, cradling their daughter between them. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Katherine asked, smiling up at him. "For everything, for staying, for loving me, for her." He nodded toward the sleeping infant. "For making Crescent be a home again." Katherine leaned forward to kiss him gently. "Thank you for finding me that day, for lifting me up when I couldn't go on." As they sat together, a family bound by love and the promise of a future neither had dared to hope for after their respective losses, Katherine thought about the strange, winding path that had brought her here. The stagecoach attack that had seemed like such a disaster had set her on the road where Xavier would find her. Her collapse from exhaustion had led to his gentle care, which had in turn blossomed into love. Life was unpredictable that way, full of unexpected turns and hidden blessings. The widow who had fallen in the road and the cowboy who had promised her rest had found, in each other, not just comfort but a love that healed old wounds and opened doors to new joys. Outside their window, the Arizona sun set over the mountains, bathing their world in golden light, a fitting metaphor, Katherine thought, for the warmth and richness Xavier had brought into her life, and she into his.